So today's the day. The official Jim Henson documentary has officially premiered on Disney+, and today I wanted to give my very, very biased review of the film and talk to you about why I think it's a wonderful documentary for people who don't normally like documentaries, like myself. I say it's very biased because I actually got to be a part of the creation of this documentary when I was still at Disney, although I am no way sponsored by Disney anymore. Like, I don't work there. They are not asking me to make this review. I am just saying it because I had such a wonderful experience working on this documentary, and I think it's really special. So yeah, this is basically my review to say I worked on it. I have a lot of bias because I really like the people and the team and the movie. It's very good. Please go watch it. That could literally just be my review and we could end it here. But a little bit more on it and for why I think it's amazing. So first off, when I was at Disney, I was a part of their unscripted and documentaries team. And so, the first thing that you kind of get, like with any job, is, you kind of get a list of all the projects that your team is working on. And for the documentary team, of course, it was a list of all the documentaries that they were working on, from the most nascent ideas still that were barely pitches, all the way to like they were basically done in the can and they just were waiting to get distributed on platform. And of all of those different ideas that I got to see, the number one that I was the most kind of zeroed in on was the Jim Henson documentary. At that point, untitled, and I just narrowed in on it because I myself am a big Jim Henson fan. So I already knew, like, if I could only work on one, that was the one I really actually wanted to work on. Although I did not say that to my boss at the time. I just had a secret flame in my heart. As a big fan of Jim Henson's, like most Americans, I was introduced to his work through Sesame Street and The Muppets as a child, and my first word actually was Ernie, from Bert and Ernie, and the first thing my mom dressed me up for Halloween was a Big Bird costume. So clearly Sesame Street has been a part of the family for a long time, like many Americans and people around the world, but it wasn't until I was 20 that I really started to fall in love with Jim Henson and his work, because that was when I first discovered the film Labyrinth. From the ye olde days of when Tumblr was first popular, that's dates me, but that's kind of where I first heard about this work, because I was really into other fandoms that were on hiatus, RIP BBC's Sherlock. And so as I was scrolling through different people I followed, I kept seeing this film called Labyrinth appear, and I was like, you know what, I gotta watch it. And I loved it. It's still my top 10 favorite films of all time. Directed by Jim Henson, produced by George Lucas, who is of Star Wars fame, and stars David Bowie, who is David Bowie, and got me into my lifelong love and obsession with that man. So if you haven't seen it, you should go watch it. I don't know what platform it's on anymore. Last time I checked, it was on Hulu, but like, I own a copy. So this is, yes, this is called a DVD, which I still have a DVD player for. So anyways, I obviously own it. I love it. I wish that at the time it had received more popular critical and commercial success, but at the same time, it is now a cult classic and people understand that it deserves respect and is amazing. So please go watch Labyrinth if you haven't yet. Watch this first and then go watch Labyrinth. And then after watching this, you'll probably be inspired to go watch The Muppet Show on other Henson things. So just have a Henson marathon. That's what I would recommend. Start with this and then just go for it. But anyways, that being said, as I continued in my professional career, Henson continued to be a creative inspiration to me. He's a wonderful filmmaker. And when I lived in New York, I actually got a chance to go see the Jim Henson exhibit at the Museum of the Moving Image, which was wonderful. Like, it was so amazing to be able to see all of the real props and costumes and everything from things like Dark Crystal and Labyrinth and so many other wonderful projects by Henson. So it kind of felt like getting a chance to work on this project was kind of like a culmination of a lot of things that I loved. And all that to say is Henson has been a big inspiration for me, and that was one of the reasons I was the most eager to jump on this project. And, being a big fan of Henson's, it was so wonderful to see a film that still surprised me and gave me new information about Henson, while at the same time, telling stories that if you are a super fan of Henson, you probably already know, but recontextualizing them in a different way from something like, for instance, Defunctland has a wonderful YouTube series on Henson. But I think this documentary is also kind of geared more towards the new style of documentary filmmaking, which, I think older documentaries, it used to be, as my boss put it, this information first kind of style. So basically, if you think about documentaries that you watched in school and you're like, oh, documentaries are boring, super guilty of that. But the idea I think of documentaries being boring is because a lot of times those sorts of pieces are organized around from like this exclusivity of information, right? Like never before seen archives, or we just got new research about this one subject, or you're watching that documentary because you are passionate about that subject to begin with, those sorts of things. Whereas this kind of newer wave of documentary filmmaking that I think is really exploding and has exploded in the past few years is a more narrative first approach. As my boss kind of talked with me about and really helped me understand, like, it's a way to still tell a nonfiction story about a famous character like a Jim Henson or a subject or whatever it is, and really use the craft of filmmaking to make it into something that a more traditional scripted piece might actually put out there. And as a result, I kind of had a crash course in documentaries and what they are, what they aren't, and how you make them. So my boss is a creative development executive, and as her assistant, I was privileged enough to be able to be let in on meetings and to see the cuts ahead of time and be a part of the process in which the dreaded studio gives the plucky creatives studio notes, which are kind of infamous for being horrible and very tonally deaf, but hopefully the creative team didn't think that, and I don't think they did. Every meeting was just very warm and loving, and I really appreciated the fact that, like, it's a Disney film directed by Ron Howard about the man who created Sesame Street and the Muppets. Like, it's not an expose. It's not this, oh, and here he was a terrible person. No, I mean, it's a wonderful film about a wonderful person. So there's nothing salacious about that. In fact, I did think it was funny. I had seen a lot of reviews about the film because it just had its premiere at Cannes a few weeks ago. And the number one thing I saw in terms of, like, complaints about the film was it was a bit mid and safe because there wasn't anything new or interesting or salacious about the character, of Henson. And I was like thinking to myself, I mean, what did you expect? It's a very wholesome film that celebrates art and talent and creativity, which is wonderful. And I think because of its decision to take a narrative and character first approach, that's why I think it's going to probably be a film that people who don't normally like documentaries will like, and people who normally love documentaries, I don't think they'll hate it, but it's not going to be the usual format. And as someone who usually doesn't like documentaries, I loved this. It was already from the outset clearly a film about a person who was an icon of the 20th century for filmmaking and, did make these beloved cultural staples to many generations, but also it was very clear that this documentary wanted to be about who Henson was as a person too, and who he was as a family man, and really having a conversation between the professional and personal lives that he held and how they informed each other, and ultimately how for Henson, there was just never enough time. And I think the idea of there not being enough time for him or for any of us really on this mortal plane really shines. And I really love that my boss in particular pushed the arc of the movie to be one focusing from a great man figure like Henson to the end of it, where it really goes from an inward-outward move of the legacy Henson has left behind, where the Henson Company is today, and how Henson kind of instilled these values of investing in and bringing up young talent and creatives and fostering a passion in them for the work that he started. So it's this really kind of wonderful, great individual to great community transition, and it's just a very lovely journey. I have watched this film in its kind of development stages about maybe 15-20 times because you just have to watch it a lot, and I think I cried every single time I watched it until like the last 4 or 5 times I watched it, where I was like, okay, now we're getting a little desensitized a little bit, but it was still just this very moving piece, and it was truly just a very lovely experience to work with. The team over at Imagine, Ron Howard's company, that is our partner on the film, joy to work with. Everyone there was absolutely lovely. The assistants are lovely. The executives are lovely. This is like the most boring story about Hollywood ever, where there is no gossip. It is all, everyone was great, no complaints, 10 out of 10 in terms of my experience at least. And that's basically my review. It's as I like to say, a tight 90-ish. A tight 90 referring to the fact that it's loosely 90 minutes long, or around an hour 30 and change. So it is a feature. It's not a series. So there are obviously things that it will have to brush over that other documentaries and biographies like Defunctland does a wonderful job delving into a bit more. But if you are looking for just a wonderful little piece to watch with your family at home, or friends, or your loved ones in general, I would definitely recommend it. I would give it a go. And like I said, it is on Disney Plus. It has just premiered today. And thank you for listening to my very biased review. I give it A++ star 5 out of 5. It was just great. I'm sure there are things it could improve on, but do not tell me in the comments, because all the publications that said the Henson documentary was mid, they are a little dead to me. I'm a sensitive creative. Don't tell me if you don't like it. Just tell me it was a good, please. But no, seriously, I hope everyone gives it a watch. I hope that you enjoy watching it and that it will inspire you as well to go out, seek more works of Henson's to watch, enjoy, or, you know, inspire you to create your own movie magic. Motorcycles. I think that's the one. Aw, gee, what is it? Aw, gee, Bert. Yeah, I can't do the voice.